the font that will actually be used is dependent on the user's computer. So we list a font stack with a list of font families, but what the browser does is it looks at the user's computer to find those fonts, and it may or may not find them. And so if it does, it will use whatever ones are available on the user's computer. If it doesn't, then it will use its own generic version. So some authors are not happy with that. They want to have more control over the font that's actually used. So there's a couple of ways to do that. And one way is to actually include a font file. And that just like we include an image file and then the browser displays the image in the web page, right up here we've done that. Well, you can also provide a font file and the browser will use that file. So instead of going and looking on the user's computer, it will just use the file that you've included. To do that, what you're doing is you're defining a font family. And you do that with the @fontface rule. And in here, you specify what you want the font to be. So the first property is font family. And here you give it a name. And you can call it whatever you want. And this is going to just create a brand new font. And then the next one is the Src property. And this allows you to access a file. So include this file. And just like we've done, we're going to put a path to that file. And then a second part of this is to specify the format. Now there's a variety of formats. And if we look at W3 Schools, we can find the @fontface rule. And it tells us the different types of font formats that are currently available and which browsers use them. So you notice that in our examples, we're using TTF and WOFF, and those are widely used in the current browsers. So here we've listed those two formats. Now notice the WOFF, the format is WOFF. For TTF file types, the format is TrueType. And then once you've described this new font, then you can use it down here in your font stack. And you use it first because that's the one you really want them to use. So you list it first, and then if it all works, if it's able to find the file, then the browser will use that as the font in the web page. If not, it will continue through the font stack. If for some reason it can't open that file, it will continue through the font stack that we already have listed. Now, there are two font files that were included in the start code. And if you try to open these on here, Visual Studio Code said, ooh, I don't open those. I don't know what you're talking about. And you may or may not have something on your computer that opens these font files. For example, if I double click on that first one, the TFF, then the TTF, then it opens one. I have some program in my computer that opens it. If I do it on the WOFF, my computer comes up and says, I don't have an app that does this, so what would you like me to open it with? So whether you can open it or not, you can find files available on the internet. You can find free ones or ones that you buy. And when you're looking for those, they'll demonstrate what the fonts look like. So you pick a font that you like, and then you save the file. And here we've saved it in a fonts folder. So let's go ahead and add this. Now, when you're doing @font families, it's good practice to go ahead and put it clear at the top, and that way any style rule can use it. So here I'll put the @fontface up there, and we're going to describe a new font family. So we list what that new font family is, and we're going to call it Quicksand. And again, you can make up, as the author, you can call the font whatever you want. And then in the source, you're actually going to be selecting a file. So you put the URL, and then in here, you're going to put the path of where this is. Now, notice that something's different here. We've been working in HTML files, and then we just list the folder, but we are currently in a style sheet. We're in CSS, so we're inside this styles folder. So the first thing we have to do is get outside the styles folder before we find the fonts folder. See how that looks? We have to get out. We are inside styles. We need to go up one folder before we see the fonts folder. So to do that, what you use in here is a // and that says go up one folder. And now notice how the editor is prompting me to say, oh, here's what your options are once you go up one folder. Well, the option that I want is the fonts folder. And then inside there, I can select whichever file I want to start with. So we're going to start with the WOFF file. And then we're going to put the format. And the format is WOFF. Now here we've described one source, but we want to put two. So what we're going to do is use a comma to separate the two that we're going to do. And here I'm going to do another one. This one, the path is still, you have to go up one folder, and then you want to go in the fonts folder. And this time we'll pick the TTF. And the format for this one is true type. It's a little different. It's not just not the file extension, but it's actually true type is the format. And those are the two we want to use, so we'll end that with a semicolon. So here we've defined a new font based on these files, and the computer will use the first one that it recognizes. Right, the browser actually. The browser will decide which format it recognizes, and it will use the first one that it works with. Now that we've created a new font family, we can add it to our font stack. But we want to add this particular font to our headings, not to all of the body text, but to the headings. So if we go down to the headings styles, and we want it to be both the heading 1s and the heading 2s. Remember that we want it to be to two different elements. We just put a comma between them. And now we can say we want the font family to be this new version. And what do we use for the name of the font family? We use exactly whatever name we gave it. In this case, we gave it Quicksand. So that's what we'll use in our font stack. Now, we want to use the same policy that we do with any time we do font family, and that is we want to give it a series of options. And Quicksand is our first option. And so then after that, we'll give it the same ones that we did up here in the body. We'll do Veranda, and then Geneva, and then finally a generic font, which is the sans serif. So there we added it to the heading 1 and heading 2s. Let's go back and save it and go back and see how it happens when we refresh it. Now we're looking at the heading 1s and heading 2s, so see what difference it makes. And there you go. There you see a new font being used for those H1s and H2s. Now, since we didn't specify in the selector, this will change the H1s and H2s on every page. And no matter what element they're in, right? Won't depend on their ancestors. So we see that change being applied broadly to all the H1s and H2s. So there we've added a new font, and we did that first by defining it in an @FontFace rule, and then using it by adding it to our font stack in the font family style rule. Now, something to note here, sometimes when you're using a font file that you get off of the web, you're required to put a notice about it and include the license in the file. So down here in a comment, you see the license notification for that particular font. And so you include it in the file, and that way if anybody is looking about the font, they'll be able to see where the font originated from and have all the access to the links to find that particular font.